Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library. It's my huge pleasure to introduce tonight's program, How Make Us Visible NJ was able to take an idea, transform it into law in less than 2 years through dedication and radical coalition building. That's not the official title, but that's how I feel about it. Before the full program gets started, I'd like to offer some housekeeping notes. We are gathering tonight on Zoom. This session is being recorded and the live transcription will be enabled shortly. If you have questions for our panelists, you can put them in the Q&A function or in the chat. I'd like to thank all of the organizations who partnered for this event, and they will be named shortly. I was excited for this evening's program and am thrilled that some amazing people from partner libraries have agreed to serve as moderators. Jenny Poo, director of Hoboken Public Library, is overseeing the $5.2 million renovation of the historic main building. Currently, she serves as the executive board president of LibraryLinkNJ, vice chair of the NJLA Public Policy Committee, and co-leads the monthly Asian Pacific Islander meetup. She most recently served as Dean of College Libraries at Hudson County Community College, where under her leadership, she won $500,000 in grant funding for college-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I'm also delighted to have Shanshan Ming. She is the supervising librarian of the Trenton Free Public Library. In this role, she manages the Adult Services Department and the library IT projects. Prior to this position, Shanshan worked at the Edison Public Library as the supervisor for circulation and IT. I know that all of you will join me in welcoming Jenny and Shanshan, who will more formally introduce this evening's program.
Great, thank you so much, Kim. And good evening, thank you for joining us. We are thrilled and honored to be co-moderating this amazing panel discussion tonight. So quickly, I just wanted to acknowledge, this is unprecedented how many libraries signed on. So very quickly, in alphabetical order, first I should acknowledge our really key sponsor, Princeton Public Library, for hosting this and making this recording available for those who can't make it. But our libraries who signed on: Bergenfield Public Library, East Brunswick Public Library, Hoboken Public Library, LibraryLinkNJ, Livingston Public Library, Maplewood Memorial Library, Newark Public Library, New Jersey Library Association Diversity and Outreach Committee, New Jersey Association of School Libraries, Pennsauken Free Public Library, not in our town, Princeton, Ridgewood Public Library, Trenton Free Public Library, and Union City Public Library. So thank you again for all our partner libraries, and I apologize in advance if I inadvertently left someone out, but we are in great company with, I have tonight my co-moderator, Shanshan Ming, so I'll turn it over to you, Shanshan, to introduce the program.
Sure, thank you, Jenny. It's such an honor to be here to co-moderating the program. Please join us to welcome Make Us NJ board members, Dr. Kanye Langevin, NYU professor Ying, New Jersey educator Sivakumar, and student advocate Christina. Tonight, they will discuss how they led a statewide coalition that advocated for the passage of the AAPI curriculum bill, which mandates the inclusion of AAPI history in New Jersey public schools, and the bill establishing the Department of Education Commission on Asian American Heritage. So to start, Jenny and I will take turns to ask you questions. My first question is for Dr. Langevin. Please introduce yourself and tell us who is Make Us Visible NJ and what's your mission?
Thank you, Shanshan. Yeah, my name is Dr. Kanya Langevin. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist working in private practice. And I'm also the mother of 2 feminists and who are part of the reason why I'm fighting this. And Make Us Visible New Jersey is a coalition of students, parents, educators, professionals who are advocating for the inclusion of Asian American and Pacific Islander curriculum in New Jersey public schools. I'm very happy to say that Governor Murphy signed into law that AAPI curriculum bill so that it is now mandated in schools. And now our follow-up mission is to see it implemented.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Sorry,
Shanshan. The next question is for NYU Professor Liu. Hi, Professor Liu. So,
hi, Jenny.
Hi. So on January, so this happened just this year, January 18th, 2022, Governor Murphy signed legislation ensuring AAPI inclusive curriculum taught in New Jersey schools. Dr. Lu, can you just talk a little bit about yourself, your background in education? Well, and then the second part of that question is, what does the legislation actually state? And what difference will it make now that this legislation has been passed?
Sure. So I'm, as you introduced my title, so I'm a faculty member at NYU Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, Human Development. My research expertise is in quantitative statistics and education. So I've studied access to quality education, different education programs, mostly in the urban education setting. I look at New York City public school data. So for me personally, this is really an incredible journey because as an academician who spent most of my career behind the computer in the office, this is my very first time actually getting a full immersion of how education system works and seeing and witness and experience, and also being part of the education policy forming. So it's quite remarkable. And I look forward to continue my research based on this experience. So hopefully in a couple of years, you get to see more what I learned from this experience. As far as, so you asked about this bill, right? We talk about this bill seems to have made a big splash, but the core of this bill is pretty brief. It's the main part of the bill is it's broad. It says the bill requires school districts to provide instruction on history and contribution of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders as part of implementation of New Jersey's student learning standards in social studies. So the bill itself doesn't really prescribe what should be taught, right? In what ways. But however, this bill also put down some mandate, right? And put on expectations on the Board of Education for them to include instruction of history and contributions in school, right? And to also have policies and procedures in place pertaining to the selection of instructional materials. And another thing I want to mention in this bill is there's actually a companion bill. It's to establish a commission on Asian American heritage within the DOE. And then this commission is going to be an instrumental part to help the implementation of the bill. And then you also ask about what differences will it make right now that the legislation has passed. So as I said, the bill itself is very broad, and also New Jersey education system is very decentralized. So the actual curriculum and lesson plans, what you will see is mostly will be under discretion of local district level. However, we do hope right now with the bill passing, we will see like the change will happen within the New Jersey social studies guideline. Well, the current version has very little AAPI curriculum content. So we hope with this bill, we can push for the change in the New Jersey social studies guideline sooner, right? And also with the passing, and it also helps to formalize a professional development AAPI curriculum. So as Connie, Dr. Langevin said, right, we're excited for the implementation part of it. And we also understand this is really, it's gonna be a long haul. Before the bill passed, there's already many groups that dedicated to AAPI curriculum resources and curriculum consultation, such as Asian American Education Project, Immigrant History Initiative, which is based in Jersey City, in South Asian American Digital Archives. So now with the passing of this bill, and we are seeing that also partnering with New Jersey Education Association, their professional development courses are being offered. So I think this will definitely help to more effectively deliver the resources to the hands of teachers for them to incorporate AAPI content. And a couple of other things with the passing of this bill is it just basically increased the awareness. And we have also been working with different professional associations such as NJEA and the New Jersey Social Studies Supervisor Association and New Jersey School Board Association, because the bill itself passing sounds very significant. So I think the increasing awareness is very important so that you can bring more people to be in this, right? To be in this, the push for AAPI curriculum inclusion. And lastly, I want to just say also a little bit that what is the impact, right? I think it also changed parents and student mindset, right? Because it's allow how for the curriculum to be effectively delivered in the classroom, we constantly need parents and students advocate. So this is, what I think this is what the bill, has, we hope, right, have long-lasting impact.
Thank you so much, Ying. I'm gonna ask educator Sivakumar a question. I hope I say your name correctly.
Sean. Yeah, Kumar.
Okay, nice meeting you, Kumar. So what does it mean to the AAPI community to have this bill become a law? And why does it matter to all students? And before you answer this question, could you share a little bit about yourself and your background in education? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I entered the field of education as an adjunct professor first. So a lot of teachers who teach, in public schools and in the K through 12, world, they often, are education majors as undergraduates, and then they enter the field of, K through 12 teaching right after that. And so, many of my colleagues have been teaching for 20, 30 years, sometimes more. So I entered the field of education at the college level first, and then transitioned to teaching full-time as a high school teacher. So at the college level, I've taught composition and English classes, and at the high school level, I'm what's called a language arts teacher, and I teach American literature. So it was an interesting perspective, to come from the college level of teaching where, diversity is just, we're all doing it in the classroom. So in terms of, an English class or like a first or second semester English composition class, the push is always to create a diverse selection of readings. And some of that is done at the high school level too, but I'm not seeing as much of it being done at the high school level. So it was a little bit of a culture shock, I would say, when I transitioned from college level teaching to high school teaching. And so there's this sort of mentality of, well, this is how it's always been done, and this is how we're going to continue to teach, say, American literature. So that was a little bit, I guess it made me pause. So, I thought, oh, okay, this is just a different kind of world of education. So that's a little bit of background in terms of, my profession. I never thought I would be an advocate, but, I was seeing things and I felt that I really couldn't not say anything anymore. So that's one reason why I, joined Make Us Visible New Jersey. I realized that there were other people thinking like me, and it was really quite an amazing thing, to not feel so isolated and alone in my way of thinking. So in terms of, what does the passage of the AAPI curriculum bill mean to the community? I would say that, number one, it's really the rise in anti-Asian hate that galvanized the Asian American communities across the country. So we need to remember that is the context for the push towards getting bills, the AAPI curriculum bills across, the bills are in various places in different states. Illinois was the first state to pass an AAPI curriculum bill. New Jersey was the second state. Governor Murphy signed it into law in around, I think it was January the 18th. So it's really that, what's happening contextually in our society that's galvanized Asian American organizations across the country to push AAPI curriculum bills. And of course, the idea that is informing all these organizations is that education is the antidote to hate. And that the bill has become law means that the AAPI community is being acknowledged as having a history in this country, and that history is part of the American story that all students should learn. It matters to all students because it affirms their place in this country and it encourages civic engagement.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And that's a beautiful segment, a natural segment talking about students. Really thrilled to hear from our student panelist, Christina Huang. So similarly, if you can please start by sharing what grade you're in, what district, how you got interested in learning about Asian American history, and what, if anything, you've learned about the Asian American community in your schooling up to this point.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here and speak with everyone and listening to also other members and their experiences. So I'm Christina. I'm a senior at Ridgewood High School. And so my advocacy work was all like an accident. I was very fortunate to have a teacher who is half Asian, and she's a huge advocate in making sure that she teaches diversity and inclusion in her curriculum. And so when I took her class, I was exposed to a whole new world of American history and world history in general, of people that look like me. I kind of grew up with more of a history that is dominated by white men. And so I've never taken a huge interest in history. And so I always felt very like repetitive and I couldn't connect with it. But once I learned that there's a lot of people who look like me, who did amazing things for our country, and it made me feel a lot more connected to what I was learning. And I thought, like, if I feel this way, there must be students that also feel this way, and other students should feel empowered by their history and want to advocate for other students. So I joined as, I guess, to do my part in trying to create a better future for students younger than me, so they can feel that they're represented in their textbooks, and they can also advocate and do things to build a better country or environment. Because I think like progress is linear, or progress is not always linear, but if we always make small improvements over time, then we can eventually build like be more progressive and build a better world.
Thank you,
Beautifully
Christina.
said. Thank you, Christina.
So I'm going to ask Ying and Connie a question. How did you two get involved with this movement, and what inspired you to act? Another part of the question is, could you please talk about the legislative process in more detail?
Oh,
Connie, you're muted.
Thank you. So I joined the Central New Jersey Asian American Reading Group, which was started by some Princeton graduate students in July 2020. And we read a lot of AAPI literature. We watched the PBS Asian American series, and it was really beautiful. It was a beautiful experience to share our histories and see the different points of resonance we had with various works of literature. And I wondered, why did I have to wait until my 40s to get this experience, and what it would have been like for me as a child to learn about this. And as anti-Asian hate was rising, I wrote to the members of the group to see if, like the Amistad Commission, which is designed to include African-American history in the curriculum, if we can work together to work on including AAPI history. And 5 people responded. And from that 5 people, it grew to thousands of people saw the need for this, including this in our curriculum. And as a psychiatrist, I see a lot of patients who have faced racial trauma, children who faced racial trauma, and I see how it impacts their sense of being in the world, how they don't feel safe, how they don't feel that they belong, how it impacts their sleep. They have nightmares. It impacts the way they are in the world, like they feel hypervigilant, like on alert for trauma, danger. It robs them of their childhood. And all children deserve to feel safe, and all children deserve to feel that they belong. And at this time, Stop AAPI Hate reported that 1 in 3 AAPI parents report their child experienced a hate incident in school in this past year. And I felt we need to do all we can to protect our kids so they can actually enjoy their childhood. And not only for them, also for their classmates, to know that all together we created this country, we all work together to build this country to what it is. And we're not forever foreigners. We've helped make America what it is. So I felt for these reasons, I got drawn to this. And I maybe Ying can go next, and then we can talk about how we legislate for the bill.
Sure. That's beautifully said, Connie. So my journey to the Make Us Visible New Jersey legislative advocacy actually started about the same time as Connie, but it didn't start as the writing group. So I'm just giving you a little bit of so I was involved with a grassroots organization called Parent and Children Education Club. Basically, it's serving Chinese diaspora community in New Jersey for in the past 17, 18 years. I'm a relatively newer member. So we were looking at this particular intersection of identity. So what does it mean by Asian American student? What is their think about their identity development, right? And in particular in the newer immigrant families. So that's how I started looking at this, and you realize that the invisibility of students in school and a lot of struggles, and students don't feel belong. So I started paying more attention to this issue. And then then you see when the pandemic hits, right? Then because we have been such an invisible group, and it's like being othered for so long, and then you realize how vulnerable we are as a group. Then I think this whole thing just climaxed when the Atlanta shooting started. And that's also how I eventually, get connected to Kanye's group, as I was one of the co-organizers of Princeton Anti-Asian Hate Rally. And then we invited one of the members, Dr. Jasmine McCone. She's a member of the writing group. So then that's how I just got involved in the group. Yeah, that's how I get there. I mean, I don't know what else part of that question.
The legislative process.
Yeah, so I'll start sharing, and Ying, feel free to pop in. So first we researched education bills that passed in our state. And we modeled our bill after the LGBTQ and disability bill, which was a bill that recently passed. We found a primary sponsor to introduce and draft the bill. So we wrote to a bunch of legislators, and luckily Senator Vin Gopal was willing to introduce the bill. Then we reached out to legislators who are in legislative districts. We first initially reached out to districts with a large AAPI population, and then we reached out to everyone. We looked for co-sponsors to find the bill, to support the bill. And we aimed to get at least 50% of the legislators needed to pass the bill. And we actually exceeded our goal. We recognized the co-sponsors on social media and with a slideshow at our events. We invited them to our events and let them know about the slideshow and our newsletter, where we were reporting who had been co-sponsoring. We wrote letters to our legislators, and when votes for our bill took place, we posted online which legislators voted in favor and which voted against. We shared our statistics with legislators, how many people were viewing our social media, our events, our newsletters. And we wrote an open letter and got as many signatures as we could in support. We got about 1,500 signatures, and that gave us a really good cross-section of New Jersey and a lot of different ethnic communities in New Jersey. And then we connected to as many communities as we could. And we wrote an organizational letter, and we got over 60 organizations to sign the letter. And the broader your coalition, the more support, power, and reach you have. We wrote a newsletter and we sent it to the individuals and organizations who signed the open letter. And then we met with important legislators and government agencies, the heads of the Senate and Assembly Education Committees and their aides, the governor's office, the Department of Education, the Civil Rights Division, Teachers Union, and we tried to get their support. And we're very grateful that people were very supportive. And we paid attention to the legislative calendar and marked out the important dates and found the key legislators who are important to move the bill forward. So that's the chairs of the Senate and Assembly Education Committee, the Senate President, Speaker of the Assembly, and Governor. And then we wrote and called our legislators hundreds, thousands of times to move our bills forward. And, we testified when the bills were discussed in the subcommittee, and all four of us have testified in the committees. And then if the bill was getting stalled and not getting on the agenda, we held a rally and press conferences and issued a press release and let legislators know how important this bill was for us. And not only the adults did that, the students did that. And the students even recorded video testimonies and sent it to the legislators. And it's very important for students to be involved, because if it's just parents talking about it, we're just intrusive, annoying parents. But if a student is talking about it, that's their education. They have a vested interest in getting their education representing them. And we showed legislators that there's free curriculum and free professional development available. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to spend a lot of money. And we amplified teachers and academics' voices. We found teachers who are willing to speak, write, testify on behalf of the curriculum. And we found teachers like Sivakumar, who is a wonderful educator advocate, who are willing to provide class examples showing how implementation can be done and how much students appreciate it. And Sema wrote a beautiful article for the NJEA review. And we found school administrators to testify on feasibility. And we shared the abundance of curriculum resources available and engaged the media with press releases when needed. And then we shared that press coverage on social media and to legislators to show that this bill is not only important for New Jersey, it's important nationwide. Everyone was watching what was happening here because what it means nationwide. And since our bill passed, there's 10 more chapters working, 10 more states working on this, and our hope is this will happen throughout the country.
Thank you so much, Connie and Ying. I was about to ask you, are there any people from other states reaching you to ask you for the experience, what you learned through this process, but you already answered 10 more states already working on this. This is really beautiful. Thank you so much for fighting for all of us, for the children of the AAPI community. Thank you.
This question is for Sema. So can you please share from your perspective as a teacher some of the logistical and practical challenges that exist into incorporating AAPI perspectives into the classroom?
I'm glad you put it that way. You didn't just say history. The bill does, talk about social studies specifically, but I think we all understand that it's social studies as well as the other subject areas. So it's history and contributions I read as, trickling down to the other subject areas, including language arts. Just in terms of the challenges, just familiarity. The teachers themselves haven't been exposed to this history and literature. So I'm a language arts teacher. I've got to say literature. They're just not familiar with it. So that's why professional development workshops are so essential. And those professional development workshops, need to be brought in at the district level. So we just need to see leadership from the districts themselves. Certainly, teachers can move things along, but how much more impactful it will be if the districts actually come on board and align themselves with this bill that was passed. The other thing, as a teacher, I don't think I was aware in past years, like before I became, like Christina, an accidental advocate. I don't think I was aware of other curriculum bills, that were passed. I think I was vaguely, aware of the LGBTQ disabilities bill, but I never thought, okay, a bill is passed now. That requires me then to integrate, some lessons, some more reading, which is easy to do in language arts, about LGBTQ and disabilities. So I would say, I think it's very important for teachers and education leaders to know about these curriculum bills and what exactly is mandated. Dr. Liu, mentioned that school districts are, we have, I think, about 540 school districts in New Jersey, and we're each our own little kingdoms. So, awareness is key, and education leaders and teachers are the ones who are going to really implement this bill. And it does not have to be something that happens in the time frame of 5 years. It can happen next year, and the mandate is for next year. It just takes, one teacher, a group of, interested teachers in a district, for example, to push this forward. And this bill is especially important for districts where, the districts has tipped to more than 50% of students of Asian heritage. So Dr. Liu is the data expert, but I do know that 7 districts in New Jersey have tipped to more than 50% of students of Asian heritage. And I do hope that those districts get on board with this curriculum bill very specifically, because it affects their demographic of students. It's so important to see yourself in the American story. It's so important to see yourself as part of the history of this country, and that history is there. It's just a matter of learning it yourself as a teacher so that you can, teach it in your classroom. So the challenge is familiarity. Yeah.
I was going to say how fortunate that Christina is to have had a teacher to expose you to your own history. I certainly didn't know anything about Asian American history until I had an Asian American professor as an undergrad, and it completely changed my perspectives. And because of her, I majored in American ethnic studies, and how life-changing that is. So to your point, Sema, so much of this starts with just teaching it to other educators. Is it incumbent upon this group? I mean, is it who the PD for that? As a follow-up question, just seems like a really big lift. Is that part of the commission's task to then aid all these school districts in implementing the curriculum?
I mean, I can take up that question. Well, we have a lot of resources on the Make Us Visible website. We also just completed a series of webinars that was, co-partner with the New Jersey Teachers Union, NJEA. So we've been offering quite a lot of PD, just through our organization. And our website is an invaluable resource for, places that have exceptional lesson plans like Asian American Education Project, Immigrant History Initiative. There's, a lot of lesson plans out there. And the PBS series, Asian Americans, is actually just really amazing. And I can definitely see history teachers bringing in, episodes from that series into the classroom. I remember when I was in high school a very, very long time ago, I have to say that now because it was a very, very long time ago, but I remember we watched the PBS series. I believe it was a PBS series, but it was called Eyes on the Prize, about the Black American experience. So in the same way, we've got, Asian Americans, the PBS series, and I think that just a really wonderful way of just implementing the AAPI curriculum bill is just take an episode, like maybe an episode about the civil rights, era, and bring that in and integrated into the study of the civil rights movement. So we get the Black American experience, we get the Asian American experience. The civil rights era was a time when many people were finding their voices as Americans. The women's rights movement was very much underway then. Native Americans were also finding their voice. So it was a time of just a lot of great, interesting social change in our country. And sometimes, at least the way it's traditionally taught, we forget about those marginalized voices like Native Americans and Asian Americans.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
I'm gonna ask Christina a question. She mentioned earlier she was very lucky to have a teacher to very inclusive. If you have a message for your teacher about this new legislation, what would you want to say to them? Like to all your teachers?
Also, my teacher, who really inspired my advocacy work, I've been keeping her updated in what I've been doing, and she's been very involved, learning about it and trying to also also making sure that she implements more of taking of what makes us visible, such as all the I guess the documents and things that we put out for schools to use, and she's been looking at that and making sure that she also can incorporate that in the classroom. I think I would tell teachers that I've had, or just teachers in general, that you have your students, your teaching influences your students a lot. And it's because I used to hate history. It was my least favorite subject, but just with one amazing teacher, it switched I guess what my favorite subject now is. I love American history, and I'm going to political science, and teachers have the power to change the trajectory of students' careers or life. And it's the way you teach your classroom, it really changes how students see the world and influences what they want to do and their extracurriculars and how they want to change the world. And so it all starts in the classroom, and I feel like we don't appreciate our teachers enough, but they have they're very influential, and basically they have to teach the next generation of leaders, and they have the power to influence them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. This question is for Ying, Sema again, and Connie. So I want to hear a little bit about your perspectives as parents. What impact do you think this legislation will have on your children's experiences in New Jersey schools? And anyone can jump in, the three of you.
Maybe I can begin because my son just graduated. He finished his K through 12 experience, and he graduated last year. And he finished his first year of college, and he had an English requirement, and he took a class on, I was very proud, Asian American literature. So he didn't get it in high school, but he got it in college, and he chose this class. So I was so pleased. So unfortunately for my child, this legislation is not going to affect him. So it's a little bit disappointing on my side, but maybe Ying and Connie can speak more to how it's going to affect their children who are indeed still in the K through 12 correct years.
Connie, you want to start? Oh, I think you.
You can go first if you want. Otherwise, if you want to go second, I'll go second.
Well, is that your daughter or I just see there's another Langevin in the audience.
Oh, that's my dad.
Oh, that's your, hi. Yeah, well, maybe I'll just start from there, because one of the issues we talk about, right, this may be not highly centered about this Asian American AAPI curriculum, but I think just in the process of, as parents, we got involved in advocacy. Because one of the stories we were talking about as our group, right, it's when we reflect how we whether it's a planned advocate or accidental advocate, but there always had been that family influence, right? When we see our parents were engaged in civics, right, in the social services. So I think there's a part of, in Chinese we say 言传身教, like you don't actually, the most effective way of influencing, right, is you do it, then your children will see it. So I think there's this particular part of the make myself feel very good about it, because I have a 12-year-old and 8-year-old, so they're probably going to benefit a lot more in this than Sema son. But I feel like because the reason we push for AAPI curriculum is to get our students to understand the contributions, and in particular, right, our contributions in civil liberties, civic engagement. So I feel, it's like they see their moms doing it, mothers doing it, and I feel like that's a very a personal aspect of it. On the other hand, when I see, because my kids are both mixed race, my husband is grew up in Colorado, so I always feel, they identify because their mother's Chinese and their one set of grandparents still in China, and then the other set of grandparents in suburban Denver, so for them, right, I feel like I don't want them to grow up with this ambivalence about who they are, and in particular the Asian American part. It's not just related to a country that's in the Far East, right? So I want them to find their roots. So I feel this having learning about Asian American history would have a very significant impact about their own racial identity. That's what I'm also looking forward to see how this unfolds.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel I would like to let teachers know, I really want it to be seen how important Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have contributed to the building of this country. We're invisible in curriculum, and we'd like to be known the many ways we've contributed. For example, most people don't know we have birthright citizenship due to Wong Kim Ark. He was a Chinese American, and he was going to get kicked out of the country through the Chinese Exclusion Act. But he fought all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won birthright citizenship because he was born here. Because of him, millions of people have birthright citizenship, and most people don't know that. And most people don't know that ESL was due to the fight of Asian Americans to be included in education. Most people don't know that Title VII and Title IX, the reasons why girls can play sports in school, are from Patsy Mink, the first woman senator of color. And people don't know that the Same-Sex Marriage Act the first case was from an Asian American and Pacific Islander couple. We've had so many contributions to our history, and we've helped make this country better, and people don't know that. And then, Attorney General Gurbir Grewal said he was one of our early supporters. And he said, children pay attention to whose stories are told in school and whose stories aren't. And it shows how valued you are. And we want our kids to know we are valued, we do contribute, and we do belong. And at one of our assembly education testimonies, Representative Myla Jacey said to us, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're probably on the menu. And this bill is like our seat at the table, showing our contribution to the American story.
Thank you. That's beautiful, Sai. Thank you. The last question I have is also for all of you, because libraries have always been supported our schools. And how do you see in the future libraries and librarians helping to implement this bill?
Libraries were my favorite place growing up. They're repositories of knowledge, repositories of culture. You're the keepers of our culture. And I hope that your collections can be diverse and reflect the diversity of our population. And, I hope that you will include texts that teachers can consult in developing curriculum. And I'll include in the chat some of the book lists we recommend. And we hope that libraries will try to make there be books. Like the first time I saw an AAPI book was when I was in high school. And I was so thrilled. I had never seen one in my life until then. And then I was so excited to see there was one more, and now there's like hundreds, so many. And I'm glad, I hope that our kids are getting to see themselves reflected.
Yeah, and that for the library, so one thing I want to thank Princeton Public Library for, first of all, for inviting us here. Also, because I'm a Princeton resident, and I've noticed Princeton Public Library have done a beautiful job. And one of the things I want to highlight is I noticed so for children's book, they have recommendations, but instead of putting, kind of separating, this is Asian American stories, right? Here's the Black stories. I noticed they're doing things like they put a little deck of books that covers so that different groups of stories. And so when children read those books, and you have a whole picture of what America is rather than segmented pieces. So I found that's really beautiful. And I like to see, library, as Connie said, right? The public library is such an important place. I like to see, practices and you guys being innovative, right? It's that can, trickle all the way down to the schools. And another thing I would like to say is media, because if you do movies, and last year I watched No Boy, that was organized by Princeton Public Library. It was beautifully done, and it elicits so much emotion. This is oftentimes when it's like reading, but then media, right? Movies and other ways of telling storytelling. It's just, very impactful and touches people by heart.
I agree with Connie and Ying. I've always loved libraries. And, librarians do such an important, service to the community. It is May, and May is AAPI Heritage Month. And I know in many libraries in New Jersey and across the country, there are displays of books to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month, which is so awesome. But just if I might speak to a point that Dr. Liu made, which is about how we display books and how books are categorized. Certainly right now, Asian American and Pacific Islander books are being, displayed in the library. But in some ways, I think that, placing books in terms of the cultural or ethnic background of the author is segregating them from the larger experience of, the American experience. So, these heritage months are so wonderful and so very necessary. Absolutely. I just wish that in some ways, and, this might be a little bit unorthodox, but in some ways, it seems to me that in 2022, celebrating heritage months should maybe be, maybe we should think about that. Like, hey, how come, Asian American history and literature isn't more integrated into the school curriculum? How come we're fighting for this like so late, in our development as a country? Yet here we are. And so just back to your question about libraries, libraries are such an integral part of, I think, every young person's life. And, I just would encourage libraries to continue to diversify their collection of books available to their community, because, the young people who are going into the libraries are the most racially and ethnically diverse generation this country's ever had. And I think that is also being reflected in, the literature that's being published. I think libraries are such an important, cultural resource for communities. And I thank all librarians. I thank Jenny and Shanshan for what you're doing. The fact that we're having this event is also just really amazing. So I want to thank you for this.
It's a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you. Christina, did you want to weigh in at all? It's optional.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good point that 1 month we have May, and it's amazing to see the displays and to see the books out. But what about the other 11 months? What are we doing then? Is it like not AAPI month? Like we still have Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders throughout the rest of the year. So I definitely think it's something that we have to work on, making sure that we continue, I guess, our dedication throughout the rest of the year. And yeah, like just having events like these, I'm so grateful to be here, and also like sharing resources and talking about like shared experiences and things like that.
Thank
Jenny,
you.
would you like to make some comments on the displays, on the library display rules?
Comments?
Yes.
Well, I'm not here to defend or to explain. I'm really here to hear the panelists. I think, all libraries are doing, look, we share this very similar conflicting emotions. Every day should be African American Heritage Month. Why is Hispanic Heritage Month relegated to October? And I will just highlight to add on to what Ying had observed at Princeton. Our neighbor across the way in Queens, they have a beautiful page. It's just like migrant experiences, and that was I thought was a really beautiful way of integrating these diverse experiences without necessarily segmenting them to a culture group. But yeah, I think, libraries we've always supported our schools and our communities, right? Through not just materials and displays and curation, but like, Ying said, through programs, showing movies, having discussion groups, offering these kind of programs. So I think that's my comment. I think everything that you said about diversifying our collections is really something. I know at Hoboken, we are doing that right now. Not saying that this is a one-time thing. This is this is really fundamentally changing a lot of the way we collect, right? Who do we collect? How do we collect? How do we ensure that our collection is not, there's this big movement in the field about decolonizing the collection, which I'll not bore you with because this is your panel today. So we'll talk about the AAPI curriculum though, but it's all really relevant. And I'm glad you're here because you can hear what libraries are doing. These are huge conversations in our field, right? Within our profession. What is it? It's still overwhelmingly white women, faces like Shankar and me and myself. We're often asked to speak because, a lot of kids haven't seen another Asian American librarian or a Black librarian. So that we're all having very similar kinds of these discussions and the work. So I think it's so great that we find allies like make us visible and to amplify your work, right? To amplify. The website that you created is it's so great with the lesson plans. I used to be a media specialist, so I totally understand about the pressure of creating a lesson plan from scratch. Meanwhile, just understand libraries always similarly, we have similar book lists, and we're always happy to collaborate and to amplify and to augment, right? I think do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. It's all, and again, this is for anyone on the panel. So 10 other states, right, are doing this. But for those of us who may not be, I feel like every advocate in some ways is accidental, right? And those are the best kind of advocates because this really comes from a place of passion. But how can other students, parents, educators, and advocates here tonight or listening to the recording get involved?
So you guys have come at the crucial time where we are in implementation. This is where it really happens. So we need you actually, because New Jersey is a home rule state and every district decides its own curriculum. So we have almost 600 school districts in New Jersey, and we need people at all of these 600 school districts. But we have partners, so it's not as overwhelming. For example, Asian American Education Project has lesson plans from kindergarten through college. And they are willing to do free, virtual, live professional development at any school district in New Jersey. So feel free to reach out to us. I'll put our email in the chat and we'll connect you. So that's just one option. Then Illinois has the Teach Act. They're the first state that passed AAPI curriculum, and teachers are welcome to attend their professional development workshops. with the NJEA, Sema and Julia and Kathy from Immigrant History Initiative and Rajneet Kami Kaur all did wonderful webinars, and those should be available, hopefully, to be watched. And then we've consulted with some wonderful social studies educators. They actually train social studies teachers, Dr. Soyun An and Dr. Noreen Nassim Rodriguez, and we're partnering with them to create virtual professional development from K to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 8, and then 9 through 12. So we are trying to get all the resources available, but we can't be at 600 school districts. So we need you all to help us and introduce us to your curriculum supervisors and superintendents and let them know that these free resources are available. In addition to that, AAPI Montclair is doing fundraising for live professional development from Immigrant History Initiative, so that they would come to your school and do a live training. So we're trying our best to bring the resources to schools, but we need your help to connect us. And I'll put a form in the chat in case you wanted to sign up to get your school to get free professional development. And we're looking for like school district champions. So people who would be the person to help connect us with their schools. So I'll put that form in the chat. And our email address too. And I don't know if anyone else wants to say something.
I just want to add one point as if you have children, students of public school, right? Just encourage your kids to speak before the Board of Ed and go to the Board of Ed meetings. You know, if you look at how in your own school district, the Board of Ed, they tend to all have different committees. Right, go to the diversity and equity committees and go to the academic achievement meetings, and also make public comments. And in particular, when students speak, it really it's very powerful, because right in New Jersey, a suburban, parents speak. Oftentimes, Board of Ed is like, oh, here comes those demanding parents. But I've observed when students speak, they really they have to take it seriously.
Can I ask a question? I'm wondering for each of you, like, was there something that was, I'm sure at the beginning it seemed like an immense task and daunting. What was sort of the most surprising thing or exciting, like what was most unexpected for you in this journey? And that could be something that you learned or something about the process that you learned, or I don't know. I'd love to hear from each of you.
I'd like to begin. I've never been part of a community like this. I've always kind of turned away from aligning myself with minority groups, I guess, which is a funny thing to say. But I think that's just, the time when I grew up in this country, assimilation was how you became American. And I also grew up in the Midwest, and probably my, family circumstances also, led me to think in this way. So honestly, this is the first time where I've, joined a group of, people who are, not part of the dominant culture, who would be labeled as minorities. And I've never been so nurtured and so seen as I have been as, with my work with Make Us Visible New Jersey. It's been so affirming for me as, on so many different levels, so many intersectional identities, but just as a human being, I felt so affirmed. And so, just very supported. And I've been lifted up in so many ways, like the publication of an article that, that was in the NJEA Review magazine last October. I mean, that couldn't have been done just with me, sending it to the editor, which I did in the past. I've sent other articles to him, but just that network and those connections of, and we did this all virtually. I mean, I don't know if you realize this, we did this all virtually, and I've never actually met Connie in person. I've only gotten to know her through all our Zoom virtual meetings. But the power of networking is something that I didn't realize until I got involved in this movement. So that's my 2 cents.
I'll go next then. Well, I mean, personally, I'm a first-generation immigrant. So I was born in China and I naturalized in my adult age. So when I swore to the allegiance, I asked myself, what does it mean for me to be in this country? And I think this journey really solidifies that I do belong, and the fact, right, I can be part of the democratic process. And also in this process, I've met so many people, right? And it's like, that made me feel not alone. It's very, very important, and also gave me a whole new perspective as a newer immigrant. It's like that, the acculturation process or integration. And it's no longer, because, we sometimes, pay attention to the words, right? You don't want to be assimilated, right? So you want to be able to still maintain your own culture uniqueness, but then you want to be part of the broader culture. I think this really gave me a very different perspective about who I am in this country, and I'm very, very grateful. And another thing I want to also mention is, so even within our Asian American community, right, we're so broad. We have so many different groups and different stories, culture, and beliefs, and right. So but we're also, oftentimes we're also segmented because we have our own group, right? So I felt like in this, you just see how beautifully different communities get together, and right, even in that legislative process. And then you just discovering also how different communities have their own way, the niche, and how you beautifully leverage all that differences. And it's just beautiful. I think it's, yeah, wonderful. Very grateful.
Well, I have to echo what both Sema and Ying said about what they has been really magical about this process and the connections. And so many times serendipity has led us to like the right connection, the right person. It's just been really very beautiful. And I didn't know anything about legislation, nothing. So like I learned so much about how the legislative process worked, just basically like flying by the seat of my pants, trying to learn how to get this bill passed. And then also something I learned was the power of letting go, and sometimes there was so much going on all the time. And every night, like before I'd go to sleep, I'd say to myself, I let go of everything. I surrender everything, and that gave me the energy to keep going, letting go, and then getting filled up, every day getting filled up by like what we were doing and our connections. And, so it's, I don't know, I feel like I learned a lot about life in this process.
I concur.
For me, yeah, I have to agree with everything that's been said. It's kind of crazy because like I'm just a high school student. Like I always felt like, what do legislators like care about what I have to say? But like sitting up there and like talking to them about my experiences and being able to like represent kids like me throughout the state, that's in my opinion very magical. And like being able to like create change and leaving almost like a legacy behind, that knowing that like what I'm doing now is going to impact so many students in New Jersey. And I think I've also learned, just like looking at all, especially what Connie has been doing, I've been learning so much about like leadership and how do you like lead a movement like this. And yeah, I've been watching and trying to like take what I've been learning from this process and hoping to implement it in the future for other things and other, moving other minority groups' rights and things like that forward too.
So proud of you, Christina, and all the group members.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you. I think this concludes our program tonight, and what a beautiful way to end it with the, hope looking at Christina. By the way, I think you should run for office someday. Just saying, you've already affected change. That's how you affect structural change. Political scientist, right? You already have the tools. You've actually created legislation. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to our amazing panelists. Thank you to Make Us Visible New Jersey. Thank you to Princeton Public Library for hosting the recording and then sharing it out. Thank you to my co-host Shanshan for being just so gracious and supportive. And Sema, Connie, Christina, Ying. This journey continues, and the work. This is the long haul. So we will all be in here to support each other. And thank you again for joining us. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.